Bringing you the world news from the prophetic perspective. L.A. Marzulli and Bill Salus come together to bring you food for thought with the MarSalus Report.
I'm your intrepid host, L.A. Marzulli.
And I'm Bill Salus.
Bill, here we are at the MarSalus Report, and this is going to be, I hope, a weekly feature. So much happened over the weekend, and of course the media went nuts. Trump launched missiles into Syria. What's your take on that?
Well, this is a huge event. I've been following a timeline of events, sort of an Israeli-Syrian timeline, over the last few months. Quite a bit's been going on since that revolution is winding down in Syria. And now we're starting to see things that are very concerning that actually have prophetic implications. I'm looking at, since February 10th, we've had a flurry of significant events, not just rumors of war that have happened, that have led and culminated to this point where Syria recently used on April 7th chemical weapons again on its civilians. And that was the red line apparently for Donald Trump, and he put together, of course, this coalition with France and Britain, and they struck Syria 3 different chemical plants.
And we have to stop right there because you spoke of a red line, and we all know that Obama allegedly had a red line, but when they crossed it, he did nothing. So by Trump acting like this, and the deal is it a false flag? We have no idea. I mean, you and I have no idea what really happened in Syria. Yeah, we get the same news clips that they show, the same 30 seconds, endlessly repeated in a loop over and over and over again. But I don't know where that was taken. I don't know what year that was taken. I have no reference to that. The bottom line is, okay, gas allegedly was used. That's the red line. And unlike Obama, Trump said, hey, there's a new sheriff in town, and if you guys do this, we're going to whack you. Your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting. You're right, because there are different takes on what happened. You've got Rachel Maddow was recently saying that this is a distraction because Trump's got the attacks coming at him, the things with Stormy Daniels and things like that. I personally believe Secretary Mattis when he says that they've got proof that Syria used chemical weapons. Basically in September 2012 is when Barack Obama drew that thin imaginary red line, which was crossed in August 21st of 2013 by Syria. Right after that, this is what got my attention. A couple days later, Israelis stood and blocked long lines to get gas masks. They were so concerned that they would be the next target.
I remember,
and then,
yeah.
Obama did absolutely nothing. So then he convenes with Vladimir Putin, and it was around September of 2013, that same year, and they decided at a summit to internationally intervene, which ultimately led to Russia's meddling intervention into the Middle East, not to get rid of the chemical weapons, but to help keep Bashar Assad in power by locking arms with Iran and Hezbollah.
And that event was unprecedented. I mean, people don't understand that the Russians have never had a warm water port like this, and they've never been down in the Middle East ever like they are now. So we've got an event with the Russians which is absolutely unprecedented, and they're not going away. I mean, Russia's not going to back out of that deal. There's no way, in my opinion.
Well, no, and again, they are a key figure in end times Bible prophecy. Matter of fact, a lot of our colleagues, prophecy teachers and prophecy students are getting a buzz right now about, wow, could this be Ezekiel 38? So time permitting in this program, I'll tell you why we need to be watching for that, but why I don't necessarily believe that's what this is at this point. But, then ultimately, as Donald Trump gets into office in April of 2017, Assad pulls out his chemical weapons again, and that's when Trump fired back and shot 59 Tomahawk missiles,
right,
making his statement then into Syria. But, and then just on the heels of Trump announcing a planned withdrawal out of Syria, we have this chemical weapons attack on April the 7th, I believe it was. And what a strange thing that Bashar al-Assad would do that right now. But again, that provoked Donald Trump to do what he did right now. And so I think we are rightfully watching what could be the stage setting for some serious epic events in the Middle East that could have biblical implications, like the destruction of Damascus in Isaiah 17. Jeremiah 49 talks about what appears to be a nuclear disaster in Iran, dealing around with that ancient territory of Elam where the Bushehr nuclear reactor is. Perhaps even this could lead into Psalm 83. The Arab League just had a meeting just recently, as we are airing this today. The 22 members came out in strong support of a Palestinian state with East Jerusalem. They're going to give $150 billion, I believe, or maybe $150 million.
It's 150 million to East Jerusalem for the Palestinian state. So,
right,
yeah,
exactly.
they've laid their chips down here for sure.
Yeah, and then of course they're concerned about Iran. They're concerned about the Houthis down in Yemen, and Iran continuing to spread its tentacles. As a matter of fact, the three big concerns that Trump has with pulling out of Syria, one is he wanted to make sure that the WMDs, which we just now are dealing with now with the chemicals again, were under control. He wanted to make sure that ISIS was under control and out of the way, and Iran would no longer be able to, with that noose of terror, as Benjamin Netanyahu calls it, by spreading that corridor all the way from Tehran to the Mediterranean Sea. So in light of that, he was wanting to pull out. But you know, who's not mentioned in those three things is Israel. What about Israel? Israel's now feeling very isolated as Trump has made his announcement. This was a one-time pop, depending on what Assad's reaction is. And of course, we could see Russia, Iran, and Assad and Hezbollah start to act out big time now. That could be on the next news program we do.
And I think what was interesting, and I blogged about this over the weekend, Nasrallah, raised his black turban head and basically put all the blame for the attack on Israel. Surprise, surprise. So, the leopard has not changed its spots. Hamas did its little demonstration right on the border. And, folks need to understand that when Hamas brings those people, it's a lot of women and children, and they press them up to the border and create a distraction. Meanwhile, way over here, they're bringing in a terrorist with a suicide vest or whatever to try to get him through to create havoc. So it's not all this, the poor Palestinian stuff. And again, it goes back into Oslo. The Israelis gave up Gaza supposedly for land for peace, and all they've had is suicide bombings, terror tunnels, rocket launchers, the whole deal. I mean, there is no land for peace. They already tried it; it won't work. So then we look at Jerusalem and what the Arabs are trying to do. The Saudis with their $150 million gift backing to East Jerusalem. So push has got to come to shove at some point. Hamas is certainly a sworn enemy of Israel. Hezbollah with 150,000 rockets, they're ready to go. And, Iran is now in Syria. So it's not like Iran's way down here and they're in Syria. And that's right next to Hezbollah turf. So I don't know, Bill. I honestly think that part of what Trump did was to show that, we're gonna do this here, but we can bring our fleet in, and we can do this within 24 hours. If you guys hit Israel, we will back Israel. And that's, unfortunately, the Arab states, that's really all they understand. If the Israelis did not have the IDF and the weaponry that they had, they'd all go in and try to wipe her out again. But they know they can't, and that's why they wait.
Yeah, and you made a good point with Russia having its footprint now in Syria, in the Middle East, deeply entrenched.
Unprecedented.
As Iran, them stepping backwards from the territorial gains and political gains they've got, military gains they've got, is probably not something we should count on happening. And so basically this is, to me, is heading towards a situation where, Trump's made a statement. Listen, I don't care if you barrel bomb blast and send, fighter jets all over and take, wipe out different populations and things like that. But when you use chemical weapons, that's his weapons of mass destruction. That's his bottom line. Well, at the same time, he's making a statement, in my estimation, with Iran, because he's got, on May 20th, he's got to decide what he's going to do about the Iran nuclear deal. And presently, you've got Angela Merkel going, don't do it, it'll cause war. You've got Macron and Theresa May, Macron of France, Theresa May of England, the UK, right, saying, listen, we don't think you should walk away from that deal. Meanwhile, China and Russia have locked arms because they got nuclear contracts with Iran, and they don't want this deal to go away. Now, these are all part of what they call the P5+1, the permanent members of the Security Council, all members of the P5+1 because they have nuclear weapons. They've got that embedded in the non-nuclear proliferation agreement that they can all keep their nuclear weapons. So we're watching this development over there now. As far as Hezbollah goes and Iran, there's a couple very interesting statements that I think we should let the audience know, L.A. And November 24th of 2017, at the end of last year, this came out of Newsweek. It's from Iran. Israel will be eradicated in the next war with Hezbollah. Now, you remember in 2006, Hezbollah lobbed over 34 days, 4,000 missiles into northern Israel, They said they won that war. They declared victory. Of course, they really didn't, but they kept Israelis in bomb shelters for almost a month. And then February 10th of 2018, this comes out of the Israel National News, Hezbollah says with that strike that's going on, Israel strike the Iranian drone and then send in some fighter jets in to take out the Iranian central command of that Iranian drone. That was on February 10th. One of the fighter jets got taken out. And here's what it says. Hezbollah says this is the beginning of a new era. The Lebanese terrorist group held Syria's air defenses after they downed an Israeli fighter jet on Saturday, saying it marked the start of a new era. Now, Syria is trying to get the S-300 missile defense system from Russia. Russia had not given it to them because of the revolution, but now they're debating whether they want to give it to them. Iran is trying to get the S-400 missile defense system. And Iran recently said, just February 20th, it said Iran threatens to level Tel Aviv if Netanyahu and Israel attack. So, are these rumors of war? Is this saber rattling, or is this the real deal?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean, look, we've watched this thing, and you and I started talking, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago or whatever, and there were rumblings then, but now, I mean, in my opinion, this thing is reaching a fever pitch. It can't continue like this. Something is going to break. Something's going to happen. I don't know what. I sort of lean to Psalm 83 / Damascus 17, Isaiah 17, Damascus being destroyed, kind of happening simultaneously, like one step, the other step follows, something like that. I think that's kind of what we're looking at, but, who knows at this point.
Well, I would say if I were to lay this out, and of course, LA, you and I are both caveat, this is our speculation, but it's educated, it's informed. I would say that the first thing that could happen, it could be the destruction of Damascus in Isaiah 17. We're told in Isaiah 17, verse 9, that there's desolation caused by the children of Israel. I would read that as the Israeli Defense Forces. We're told in Isaiah 17, verse 14, that overnight it happens. You see Damascus one evening, but the next morning it's gone. Israel has possession of the type of technologies to do that. I would then be looking at if this is to follow or even precede perhaps Isaiah 17, is Jeremiah chapter 49, verses 34 through 39, dealing with Elam, E-L-A-M. Hugs the west side of the Persian Gulf. There's a nuclear reactor there, the Bashar nuclear plant. Says at some point the Lord gets fiercely angry with the leaders of Iran. I believe that time is now. That they want to launch something lethal somewhere, and he prevents that because he says he'll break the bow at the foremost of their might. And it says because of his fierce anger, he will create a disaster in that area. And it sounds to be of the proportion of a humanitarian crisis because it says in the prophecy, he will bring the four winds from the four quarters of heaven and scatter the indigenous population, the Elamites, now the Iranians, into all those winds. There'll be no nation spur over the outcasts of Elam don't go. Now, with that said, I think ultimately where this goes is the Arab League meets again, like they just did, and says, oh no, what's next? Damascus is gone. Is it going to be Beirut? Is it going to be Cairo? And even though at this point they all don't like Iran, they're the enemy of my enemy in the Middle East is the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
That's right.
But you notice how they still are rallying around. They're criticizing Trump for his plan to move the embassy to Jerusalem. They want to give money for East Jerusalem for the Palestinian state. So they are not changing their true colors about their disdain toward Israel and their desire for a Palestinian state. So I would say Psalm 83 would then come on the heels of that. And there's other prophecies that we put forward in our books. I've got them in my Now Prophecies book to be watching for.
It's definitely wars and rumors of war. And what amazes me is Turkey. You go back 10 or 12 years ago. I mean, okay, Turkey was sort of saber rattling, but now with Erdogan, it's a whole different deal. He's gone on the record. Basically, he can't stand Israel and wants to bring back the old Ottoman Empire, which that's essentially Israel and Syria and Iraq and everybody else, and it's alarming where he's at. I mean, and of course that figures right into the Ezekiel 38 scenario, which is after everything that we just talked about. But it's lining up. The players are there, and that's unprecedented. I mean, the fact that Russia and Iran are in bed together in Syria. I mean, as far as I know, and I'm a student of history, that's never happened historically. So when we get that punch list in Ezekiel of the nations that come up against Israel, and Gog and Magog, and further down Persia, which of course is another name for the traditional name for Iran. Iran's the invention of the 20th century. So it's been called Persia for millennia. They're in bed together, and I find that absolutely incredible. It reminds me of a saying that I penned a while back: what was foretold will unfold, what was written will come to pass. What was written will come to pass, what was foretold is unfolding, and that's what we're seeing right now.
Right, and Jan Markell has a funny thing, or a very telling thing she says on a radio show. She says, people say things are falling apart in the world, but she says things are falling together at this point. You know, these are national countries that have relationships that are in Bible prophecy. So you're talking about Turkey. You know, Turkey, Iran, and Russia, these seem to be the leaders of Ezekiel 38, the 9 populations listed there, which includes other countries around northern parts of Africa, North Africa, Libya, you know, perhaps Somalia and Morocco and Tunisia and things like that, and some of the breakaway republics. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because there are a lot of people right now, because they see these relationships in the news with Turkey and Iran and Russia, thinking, well, this must be Ezekiel 38. So I would ask those people, because I think it's definitely drawing near, I would say, are all the prerequisites in place? Is Israel dwelling securely in the midst of the land of the Middle East, the promised land, without walls, bars, nor gates, with very great plunder and booty, because that's what Russia comes after? And presently they're not. They're dealing with Hamas tunnels. They're dealing with 150,000 missiles pointed at them from Syria. They've all pretty much got gas masks. They know they have to be within 30 seconds of bomb shelters. You know, I've heard some of the people who advocate that this could happen now say, well, Israel's never dwelt more securely in their life. And I say, well, compared to what? They've actually never been under such a great existential threat in their life at this time. So and really, if Russia were to come together right now with Turkey, which, by the way, Turkey recently sided with America, France, and Britain on the attacks, they said that, you know, that Assad shouldn't be using chemical weapons. So, you know, that relationship isn't totally formed yet. However, Turkey and Russia's relationship is growing stronger and stronger. Turkey is heavily dependent on Russia for its natural gas resources. And again, they're contracting I think it's a $20 billion contract with Russia to build a nuclear reactor in Turkey. And I think they want that by 2023. So the relationships are incredibly strong there. But I asked this, if Russia were to invade Israel right now, would it be for plunder and booty? And would Russia be coming together with, go ahead and grab Ethiopia now and Tunisia and Morocco? I mean, you know, I just don't see those forces in alignment just yet. But what I do see in alignment is Israel taking the area to task with Syria and Iran and things like that, Hezbollah. That's what I'm watching for.
Yeah, and I am too. I think that at some point Hezbollah is going to attack and perhaps in tandem with Hamas, and maybe even aided by Iran at that point. And that of course brings into the Bashar reactor. You know, Israel's looking at that thing, and at some point it's got to cut the head off the snakes, and that's really what we're looking at. So, you know, Bill, we'll be back again in the not too distant future with another report. I mean, so much to talk about. And thanks for doing this. You're listening to the MarSalus Report. Bill Salus, L.A. Marzulli, and we'll be back again in the not too distant future. Thanks for watching.
By far the most important thing today, not only today, but in a historical perspective, the most important thing is to make sure that a militant regime, a militant Islamic regime or a militant Islamic movement does not get its hands on the weapons of mass destruction.
Missiles cloud Mideast skies over the Persian Gulf. Iran shuts down the Strait of Hormuz. Arab oil is choked off to world markets. Hezbollah and Hamas launch scores of missiles into Israel. Terror cells initiate cycles of violence in America. About 2,600 years ago, the Hebrew prophets Jeremiah and Ezekiel issued parallel end times prophecies concerning modern-day Iran. Today, the rogue country is becoming a nuclear nation and aggressively advancing its hegemony throughout the greater Middle East. Nuclear Showdown in Iran, revealing the ancient prophecy of Elam, is a non-fiction thriller taking the reader on a journey of discovery through the eyes of the prophets and the minds of today's key national players. But there's a backstory, an even bigger story. It's a spiritual showdown in Iran between Islam and Christianity.
Iran is being transformed into a Christian nation in this generation. Iran has the fastest growing evangelical population in the world. Iranians are experiencing miracles, healings, visions, and dreams. And with the help of satellite television, millions of them are coming to Christ. 2 years ago, Iranian government began cracking down on Christianity. But it's not working. Christianity is growing in Iran. Iran is in the Bible prophecy, and many Iranian Christians are excited about what the Bible says about the future of Iran. Please pray for your brothers and sisters in Iran.
Pick up your copy of Nuclear Showdown in Iran, revealing the ancient prophecy of Elam.
What if what happened in Fatima 101 years ago was much more complex than any of us could have imagined? What if there was a fourth witness hidden away for decades, and through the detective work of researcher Fina Diarmata, this witness was discovered and interviewed? In that interview, the fourth witness described seeing a being with blonde hair floating in midair above the same tree that the apparition would later appear over. What if the so-called angel hair that fell over the crowd is also reported by witnesses who have had close encounters with UFOs today? Then there is the dull silver disc, which flew over the 80,000 people gathered at Fatima, which seemed to create chaos as car windshields exploded, hoods flew open, and gasoline spontaneously combusted. What if there was a picture taken 101 years ago that lay undiscovered in the Fatima archives until one man, Jose Machado, had access to it? What he found may be a smoking gun. Then there are the numerous reports of apparitions and so-called sun miracles. But what are these really? Could they be harbingers of deception? This is Fatima 2, Strange Phenomenon.